chocolate and cardiovascular disease. What a sweet deal. I mean, look at some of the most recent studies. Improved endothelial function with dietary flavonols. Eating a moderate amount of chocolate each week may be associated with a lower risk of stroke. And late this summer, a Cochrane review found flavanol-rich chocolate and cocoa products may have a small but statistically significant effect in lowering blood pressure. We're going to be talking about the field of heart failure right now, but I want to introduce you to two of the paper's authors, Dr. Rodney de Palma, Barts Health NHS Trust, London Chest Hospital in London, and Dr. Roger Corder of Queen Mary, University of London. First off, let's just go back to the whole broad picture of chocolate. How did you end up studying this particular subject, the whole idea that chocolate is healthy? It makes everybody happy, but what prompted that?
Well, basically, I was doing research on red wine about 10 years ago and realized that it was the flavonols in red wine that were protective. But it's impossible to do clinical trials with red wine. So the obvious solution was to find another flavanol-rich product. And that's why we focused on using dark chocolate, but using the sort of amounts that are found in a good tannic red wine. So something that we'd found associated with lower cardiovascular risk and higher longevity in southwest France. That was the background. And this was the sort of product, and the end point was to really look at how that might be beneficial in a disease where endothelial function played a really major part in predicting risk and mortality and risk of clinical events. Here was a way to test whether treating endothelial dysfunction really could make a difference.
And thank you, Dr. Corder, for heading off into the chocolate area, because I drink red wine, but I actually prefer chocolate if given the opportunity. Okay, so the paper itself that you're presenting here at the AHA meeting is High Flavanol Dark Chocolate Reduces NT-proBNP in Patients with Chronic Heart Failure. Tell me about the study.
So essentially, following on from what Roger just said, we thought we'd collaborate in doing a randomized study in chronic stable heart failure patients, because most of the data that you've been mentioning just in your intro is observational. As you said, there's a lot of evidence showing that endothelial dysfunction is a good marker of cardiovascular outcome. So we thought we would study the stable heart failure population and use BNP, end-terminal BNP, as a primary outcome measure to see whether that was affected by ingestion of a specifically manufactured high flavanol dark chocolate in comparison to a low flavanol dark chocolate. And the key thing to remember here is that the doses that we were using were much higher than have been used in any of the observational studies that have so far been carried out. So we're very clear that there is a clear dose relationship in the sense that if you don't have a high enough dose, you see no effect at all in endothelial function or outcomes. Whereas if you use a high enough dose, then you might do, and that's what we tried to look at in this study. And we used a double-blind crossover design where 32 patients were randomized either to a high flavanol chocolate or a low flavanol chocolate, and then crossed over to the opposite chocolate, and we assessed them at 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and 12 weeks. And we found that BNP was reduced by an average of 39%. And some of the secondary outcome measures, including diastolic blood pressure, was reduced as well. So these are all very encouraging.
And does it suggest mechanism?
No, I think that's something that we need to look into further, and this is if you like, a pilot study, right. And we're hoping to spur on with some more work on this to look at the mechanisms. No one really knows how the flavanols work, but clearly one of the options is that there's a receptor that it acts on, but there are many other possibilities. But this is really a sort of a pilot study, just as a sort of proof of concept to see whether flavanols do actually have a potential benefit.
I mean, one of the criticisms of almost all of the trials that have been done and reported is heterogeneity. And is there, in your study, are you able to maybe control a little more for that because of the careful enlisting of people in this trial?
Yeah, I mean, although there were only 32 patients, I mean, it was a double-blind crossover design, so the patients have acted as their own control, so that really makes the imputations in terms of the results statistically significant. I mean, it's although they're small numbers, that the design covers for that. we were very careful in selecting stable heart failure patients who'd had a history of objective evidence of coronary disease and who'd been on optimal medical therapy based on national UK guidelines. So we were quite methodical about making sure those patients were selected correctly. One important thing to say is that we did have patients who dropped out because of unpalatability of the chocolate, and that is something that we will be looking at in future studies, hopefully by creating a tablet form perhaps of flavanol rather than having it embedded in the food matrix of chocolate.
Because we're not talking sweet chocolate here, we're talking about a really strong, good dark chocolate.
Yeah, this is something that you can't buy in the shops, and the study is not an endorsement for eating chocolate. But clearly, unfortunately, but clearly it's an important food matrix for flavanol. Red wine and chocolate are the two sort of the two foodstuffs, if you like, that have the highest content. And we wanted to start off with that, but clearly it's the flavanol itself that's very important.
Right.
And when you're buying chocolates, there's no indication of how much flavanol there is in the chocolate bar. So this is definitely not an endorsement for eating chocolate.
So Dr. De Palma has given us the study results. Dr. Corder, where to now?
Well, can I just first comment on the study results and your discussion around chocolate? I mean, we've also analysed lots of commercial products, and our high flavanol dark chocolate had 1 gram of flavanols in 50 grams of chocolate. If you look at the average product out there, it's about 250 to 300 milligrams, so a quarter to a third of what we use.
Right.
So you can't think that dark chocolate is the answer. It's got to be a flavanol-rich product. The other thing about mechanism, although we don't understand that sort of underlying cellular mechanisms that are triggering these responses, what's interesting about this study is that on patients with optimal therapy, we see that we can lower blood pressure and reduce BNPs, which suggests we're vasodilating and reducing afterload. Now, that really needs further study in a much bigger population to see how that impacts on heart failure. Because on most drugs, you get to the point where the patients are too vasodilated to up their doses anymore. So that I think is one of the sort of significant clinical findings of the study. What's next? Well, it's obviously to work with a higher purity flavanol extract and formulate it so that we can see the same benefits and then look at it from a long-term perspective. So outcome studies have to come. You know, there's too often studies are done with foods, all sorts of hypotheses are put forward, but they're not taken through to an outcome study.
It's got to be fun to work on this.
Yeah,
at cocktail parties, you have to have some more to talk
certainly
about
very
than
useful for
some
that.
doctors.
No, for sure.
I think that it's actually fascinating because you can put a lot of money into science, but that doesn't necessarily create the answers. I mean, we have to look at the long-term benefit in the patients, and it's still a hypothesis that we can treat heart failure with flavanols. I mean, that's still a hypothesis. However, there is a history, and hawthorn extract, which is a traditional remedy for heart failure, is a flavanol-based product.
And what was it? I mean, one of the early drugs in cardiology was from a plant. Digitalis, thank you. Yeah, I just blanked on that. But yeah, Digitalis is, of course, heart-related and plant-related. So it is a great deal of fun, and I thank both of you for coming. This is just great fun to talk to you on this particular subject. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for CardioSource World News, I'm Rick McGuire.